Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Remember to subscribe to the show. Follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Aston Villa have signed 21-year-old Everton forward Lewis Dobbin, while Tim Iroegbunam has joined the Toffees for a reported £9 million. To talk about that, I'm joined by Matt Jones from the Blue Room podcast and Liverpool Echo newspaper. Matt, good to speak with you. What can you tell us about Lewis Dobbin?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. First and foremost, looking forward to talking about these deals that are in no way suspect or clearly very separate. I think we can say as the clubs have been keen to stress. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a surprise this one to be honest. He's had an interesting career at Everton. I think if you go back 2 or 3 years ago when he was first coming through, there was a lot of talk about him maybe going to Borussia Dortmund or one of the big German clubs, and Everton were really keen to get him tied down to a new contract. And for a while, it looked like he wasn't going to sign it. In the end, he did, and everyone was very happy. But it's just never quite been able to fully kick on from there. He went out on loan to Derby and showed little bits and pieces while he was there, and missed a penalty at Anfield and a penalty shootout, as any on loan Everton player would be obliged to do, of course, in that situation. Um, and yet he came back, I think, at the start of last season and was not really expected to be a factor in the squad at all last year. He scored a good goal in pre-season in a behind closed doors game against Monza. The sort of made everyone kind of sit up a little bit and go, "Oh God, do you remember him? We were desperate to keep him a few years ago. He's still knocking around." And then obviously last year he was around the first team squad without ever really nailing down a first team place. So for Villa, who are in the Champions League and have got some amazing forward players to go out and get him, is coming by surprise a little bit. But he is a lad who's got ability. You could see him potentially filling in as a backup option in the wide areas because he's speedy, he's versatile, he works hard. But if someone had said to me at the start of the summer that he was going to go to Aston Villa, I would have been very, very surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised. Robenham going to Everton feels quite similar as well. But, you mentioned his versatility. Where can he function across the forward line?
I think he's looked at his best on the left hand side when he has been given a rare chance. I think he actually came on at Villa Park in a game that Everton got absolutely hammered in at the start of last season and had a few little bright moments in a 4-0 defeat. But he feels very much as a winger. I think there have been times where he's just looked like he's a lad who needs more top level football. He got a start actually early in the season against Wolves, and he was up against Semedo, who I know is not an amazing defender. I think he's renowned more for getting forward, but he didn't really give many problems that day. And his best moments for us have been just kind of fits and starts off the bench. But even when he has come off the bench at times for Everton last season, it always felt like Dyche was very reluctant to turn to him, even being brutally honest. It felt like Everton had to be in a very desperate situation in terms of players being really tired or players being injured for him to come on. Like the goal, which I'm sure you've all saw against Chelsea last season when he came off the bench. I remember being in the ground that day and Jack Harrison, who was just, earlier on today, agreed to sign for Everton again, was really struggling for fitness and form that day. And it became a case of, this lad needs to come off. What warm body have we got on the bench who can come on and replace him? And maybe that's being a bit harsh on Dobbin, to be fair, but it always felt like when he got a chance on the dice, it was a sort of last roll of the dice, or he was forced to do it. But um, but I think there is clearly a ceiling there with him. There have been moments in an Everton shirt where he's got the ball, he's taken people on, he's had a strike from goal from distance, and you can see that if there is something there that maybe a top coach like Emery could mould. But I think that's only going to come with playing regular games. It's only going to come with playing regular games in his best position. And I just look at Villa and the quality they've got, and I just wonder where that's going to come from.
Yeah, I did wonder that. You sort of hinted at it there. Like, is there a potential that maybe, I don't know, Sean Dyche's approach, maybe Dobbin just wasn't really a player that was that well suited to it. And as I say, maybe going into Aston Villa with an Unai Emery, maybe that is, maybe the style of football will just suit him better than perhaps what Everton are currently playing under Dyche.
Yeah, potentially that could be something. But I think as well with these young players, certainly at Everton, you get a chance very early on in the season. I think a lot of times in these Carabao Cup games, don't you, to make an impression, and then typically because we're not that good. We go out early and those chances dry up as the season goes on. Whereas I think, teams higher up the league, you can give young player a chance in a game. They might not necessarily play very well, but you get through, you've got another round and then another round. You can have a proper look at them. Um, and Dobbin played earlier in the season. I think it was a Doncaster who were bottom of the Football League at that time. And he really struggled on one of the worst Everton performances I've ever seen, really. And he got dragged off, and Everton eventually won the game 2-1, but that was kind of him for a while then. So I think that game sort of saw Dyche lose a lot of trust in him. But being brutally honest about Sean Dyche, I think what he wants from his wingers is players who are going to run up and down, who are going to cover the fullbacks, and who are going to be happy to sit into a shape. And when I'm looking at Lewis Dobbin as a footballer, is covering the fullback one of his best attributes? Probably not. Is staying in shape one of his best attributes? Probably not. He is someone who probably will benefit from a little bit more freedom, who can come off that line. Maybe doesn't have to run back all the time and cover his fullback. So with that bit more positional freedom, with and certainly the way Villa play as well. And I think we spoke about this last season. It always feels like under Emery, Villa have played with like a winger who sort of half plays as a centre forward. Like I could see him being good in that position. Just having that free to come off the line and support a striker. So definitely, I think looking at his attributes and what he's got, you'd say that an Emery blueprint was definitely more suited to him than a Dyche blueprint.
Right, yeah. It's quite interesting because we signed Morgan Rogers back in January, I think it was, about £8 million with add-ons, and came in from Middlesbrough, and it was a little bit of one of the. I think a lot of people quite surprised by it, and he didn't necessarily catch on straight away, but then just after about 5 or 6 games, suddenly he really started to fit into Villa very, very well, and started to score some brilliant goals, and suddenly now looks like an absolute potentially elite Premier League player, and he's just 22, and so yeah, I'm just sort of selfishly hoping that Villa have sort of seen something that they saw in Morgan Rogers' own data that they might have seen with Lewis Dobbin as well, and instead said, actually, there might be something we can mold into here. Maybe the system we have and the style of play we have might actually just suit his profile more than it currently does at Everton. Harrison and Dwight McNeil, I think, are your two main wingers. They're quite physical players, right? They sort of get back and forth. So, and Dobbin's not really that profile.
Yeah, I suppose that from Villa's point of view, what I would say is that like I mentioned at the start, like this was a lad 3 years ago who really top sides in Europe were being linked with. So it could be one of them where they thought, this is a chance to get someone in for a pretty modest fee. Obviously Everton and Villa have been in conversations over other players as well. It feels like one of those, like especially the position you guys in. And I know PSR is obviously tight for both of our clubs at the moment, but the position that you're in, where you've got such a good squad, you've got such a strong manager, and you build them really well, and it is really settled. A player like him who has got clear ability, I imagine will count quite well towards your Champions League squad as well, in terms of ticking off some of the homegrown quotas and stuff like that. It feels like one of them where it might be worth a flyer, but it's been quite hard to get a sort of a gauge on Dobbin, because his first team appearances have been so fleeting. He's not really done amazingly out on loan. He's tends to always have shone brightest in those under 21 games, but what the level is stepping up for that. So like if someone had said to me that at the start of the summer, like he's going to go and play for the best team in League One next season, like I would have, like that would have felt fine, but also if Bournemouth had signed him, that also would have felt fine, if you get what I mean. Like it feels like one of them where his career is at a point still where he could still go either way. He feels like a lad with a lot of talent, but a lot of flaws to iron out as well. But we don't know whether he's going to be able to do that. I don't think of Villa, because I can't see him getting a lot of games.
Okay. So, and his main attributes, I guess, are kind of his low centre of gravity, skillful, good at capable of beating a man, and is that sort of what he's best at?
Yeah, he's really quick, really direct. I think the goal he scored I'm sure you can find it on Twitter. The goal he scored for Everton against Monza in pre-season last year was exceptional. I think he beats 3 players, cuts inside and bends it in the far corner. But like again, he's one of those players, and I'm sure you've had them at Villa down the years, that when they're scoring goals in the under 21s, it's when you have tough times, you sort of go, we need to get this lad in the team a little bit more. He's never been able to quite translate that from that level up into the Premier League. And I think even when he was in League One, there were signs that he struggled for consistency and struggled with the physicality sometimes. But But like I said, with better players around them in a more settled system, maybe being drip fed minutes at the start of the season here and there, and then given a few other opportunities, it feels like one that he could be a useful option for the Villa, definitely.
Okay, and well, it's quite interesting that Dobbin's come to Aston Villa and Tim Iroegbunam has gone to Everton. So the deals between Everton and Aston Villa and Chelsea, involving another few other players, it's caused somewhat a bit of a firestorm online. Few people talking about it. The critics say these moves are solely PSR related. What do you make of it all?
I'm not too bothered, to be honest. It's one of them where I think this is just a natural conclusion of what we saw last season, where I think these rules were considered to be quite toothless. Well, people thought they were going to be quite toothless for a while, weren't they? And obviously Everton got stung with it twice. Forest got stung with it as well. You've got the subsequent appeals from both clubs, although Everton obviously dropped theirs. And I think what you started to see last season with Everton's responses and Forest responses is sort of the establishment of some kind of precedent. And I think now these are getting taken more seriously, and with them still being in their relative infancy, I think you always try and find ways around them, don't you? You always try and find loopholes. You look at what Chelsea have done with the amortization over those long contracts, and this is just the natural consequence, I think, of a lot of teams being in a tough position and kind of getting together. So I mean, it seems sensible, doesn't it? I'm sure, from our point of view, both of our football club's point of view, it's nice to see Everton being smart in the transfer window and finding ways to get around these, because it's not been our forte at all over the last few years. So it's good to see there's, even with in the midst of this takeover and not really having a board and no real leadership at the football club, there is some smart people in the room, it seems. I'm sure that some people will, won't quite like it, but this sort of thing's going on all over the place, isn't it? Look at Chelsea a few months ago selling themselves 2 hotels to try and get around this.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely sure if there's any way. If you're the Premier League and you want to punish this sort of thing, how can you say that Everton paying 9 million for an England youth international midfielder is not a sincere transfer? How can you punish Aston Villa for doing the same? Again, a young, talented player for a similar sort of fee. I don't think you can. So I think unless the rules are tweaked, it's going to carry on. But like I said, it's just nice to see Everton being seemingly sensible with the trade and for a change. And from what I've read about Iroegbunam as well, he seems like a good player. Obviously, not quite good enough for that really good Villa midfield, but from our point of view, I'm sure he could come in and do a good job. He seems like a talented lad. So, people will raise their eyebrows at it for sure, but I think that as long as these rules stay in place and as long as they're stringent and as ridiculous as they are, in my opinion, to a certain degree, then we're going to get more of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm intrigued to see how Iroegbunam does at Everton. I think there's a lot of good physical attributes to him, and I think in pre-season last year there were moments where you saw him beat a man, sort of gliding past them. And I think this season he's been injured a lot, and then it's been difficult for him to get into a high performing Villa team. But I think if he gets more opportunities under Sean Dyche, again his physical profile might really actually suit a sort of Sean Dyche style of play. And I really, really hope he does well at Everton. So just not too well against Aston Villa when he plays us.
Of course. Yeah.
But Matt, it's been great to chat to you. Thank you very much for coming on. Where can we find you and your work online?
Yeah, if people want to listen to our podcast, it's at the Blue Room EFC on Twitter, and of course at the Liverpool Echo as well. I'm an editor over there, but we've got a lot of great writers doing really good stuff around Everton, and certainly around the PSR stuff if people want to read any more on that. But listen, I'm sure the way it's going, I'm sure we'll be speaking again before Thursday to keep. Maybe we can do a Calvert-Lewin Watkins swap deal or something like that. That'll be see.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't mind Onana. I think I saw Onana playing in midfield with Tielemans the other day.
Do you know what? I think a lot of our supporters will be happy to see, as long as it's not Brown Fleet. I think a lot of our fans wouldn't mind any of our players going or Pickford. But yeah, the way it's going, I'm sure we've got a few more reserve team players you can trade for the end of the week.